Hello everyone, Redbeard here, and we're back at it again with another Total War Warhammer video. For today's video, we have Part 2, Chapter 4 of my Possible Chaos Units video series, and this will be the final chapter to close out the series. This series is not afraid to explore the different universes and supplements of Warhammer that can make the biggest strategy game of all time into all it can be. This means we may explore the Monstrous Arcanum, End Times, Age of Sigmar, where appropriate, and others. In particular, most races should be very cautious when considering adding Age of Sigmar units, but I think Demons of Chaos should welcome it with open arms. Mods can introduce AOS units all they want, but I believe the vanilla game should primarily, or perhaps only, focus on adding AOS units to Chaos. That being said, there are many units suggested from Fantasy that coincide with units we only see in the other settings I've mentioned. For Slaanesh, we have a plethora of units to choose from as pertains to this series, albeit they are all Age of Sigmar, save one. Shout out to I Don't Know You, Who Are You, which is a bit of a mouthful, and Fisherman52, who I know have been looking forward to this video. Let's waste no more time then and jump in. We'll begin with the Myrmidesh Painbringers. They are members of an elite Slaaneshi warrior cult. Each member considers themselves to be a paragon of battle, taking pride in dealing death in the most painful, yet beautiful, way. They are champions of Slaanesh who can only find pleasure in the thrust of combat, embodying the martial pride of the Dark Prince. Indeed, they see themselves above most other members of their carnival, being stoic and impassive where others are depraved and crass. Although the Order swells in number as Slaanesh's powers grows, it is still no easy feat to join the ranks of the Myrmidesh. The aspiring Painbringer must overcome 6 harrowing trials, each gradually escalating into more and more of a visceral assault on the body and sense. The last trial is the most grueling, for an aspirant must ingest 6 intoxicating potions before battling a host of gradually more powerful foes, even as their vision swims with mind-bending hallucinations. Only those truly adroit killers who survive such an experience and ignore all other distractions and temptations are granted admission into the Myrmidesh. Each Myrmidesh sect is devoted to one aspect of a form of combat known as the Dance of the Wailing Blade. The specifics of such a combat do not matter. They can range from deflecting enemy blows before unleashing a single perfect countercut to weaving their wicked scimitars in a serpentine flurry that overwhelms even the stoutest defense. So long as it delivers a crippling agony to their victims, it is accepted. Myrmidesh cohorts wait with unnatural stillness at the heart of the battle line, observing the approach of charging enemies, or those driven to madness by the arrows of the Blissbarb. Then, as swift and sudden as a viper, they strike, leaving their enemies racked with debilitating convulsions, before striding on to their next kill. On the rare occasion that a Painbringer's perfected technique fails, their true colors emerge, with a wail of spiteful fury. They descend into a frenzy of wild atavistic blows, only when the offending enemy has been reduced to naught but a bloody mark upon the earth will the Painbringer return to their previous sense of false decorum, the facade returning as suddenly as it dissipated. Upon succeeding in their trial, the Myrmidesh are granted a curved blade and a rune-marked shield, as well as the cult's signature sleek armor. Now, for their stats, so the Myrmidesh Painbringers, they'd be sword and shield infantry. They would have enchanted armor, so that would help them deflect magical attacks brought upon them, same as the Silverin Guard have enchanted armor from the High Elves. The armored and shielded, charge defense against all, charge reflection as well, dodge, armor piercing, anti-infantry. 16 units, so very, very close feeling to the aspiring champions, the undivided version. 7,000 health. Of course, it's Slaanesh. They should be a little squishier than all the other variants, basically. Still at 120 health with silver shields, so definitely a pretty tanky unit as far as Slaanesh goes. 80 leadership to match the aspiring champions, speed 40 because they're just part of Slaanesh. Marauders of Slaanesh have 38, so I think it makes sense to give these guys at least a little bit more, even though they're kind of a tanky holdy unit. Melee attack 52 and melee defense 54, poison attacks, magical attacks. I think originally, so that they drink all the potions to do these trials. That's where I got the poison from. They might lose the poison though, just have the magical attacks if you needed to nerf them a little bit. But also I think the poison works well with the Dance of the Wailing Blade, which I'll get to in a second. Weapon strength 96. So again, very close to the regular aspiring champions. Armor piercing anti-infantry. Charge bonus 26, pretty decent. For their abilities, they would have Encourage, Hide in the Forest, Vanguard Deployment, Immune to Psychology, Charge Defense Against All, and Charge Reflection. The only one I might lose there is the Vanguard Deployment. Most of these Slaaneshi guys I gave Vanguard Deployment because generally that's an ability they have in their army, so I think their elites having that makes a lot of sense. But in the old aspiring champions before Warhammer 3 and Warhammer 2, they had Vanguard Deployment. So that's where my thoughts are with that. Now, for their unique ability, they'd have Dance of the Wailing Blade. So it's a passive ability, and it's disabled if hit points are less than 50% base. So they're good initially, but once they start getting, nicked and cut and beaten and bruised, they're going to be losing this ability. They're meant as not to fight on their own. They're meant to supplement the army in a strong way. So they'd have, with this ability, as long as they are above 50% hit points, they would have plus 12 melee defense and plus 8 melee attack. And base weapon damage plus 10%, armor piercing weapon damage plus 10%. But the real part that's interesting would be getting speed plus 20. Now this might be a little high, maybe it's plus 10. But speed plus 20, I just want it to feel noticeable. For 15 seconds after disengaging from combat. So this is how I imagine they get used, right? Like, judging from their lore, they're supposed to supplement Blissbarb Archers and Blissbarb Seekers and, Seeker Cavalry. So basically they sit there in the front line, just stoic waiting. Then the enemy hits them. The enemy is now dealt poison, so they're going to have less speed. But these guys, as soon as they want to disengage, so once the cavalry gets around the flanks and hammers, does hammer to anvil on the enemy, these guys can disengage. Then the Seekers can disengage if they need to, but likely the enemy is just going to be broken anyways. But it gives these guys a chance to slip away and reform the front line elsewhere. So that's my thoughts on how they would work. Now, there are some quote-unquote more elite versions of the Myrmidesh Painbringers in the Symbaresh Twinsouls, who are warriors, usually ex-Myrmidesh of Slaanesh. They are chafing being one amongst the faceless many. They took the shortcut to power and allowed themselves to be possessed by a demon of Slaanesh. Think Malice Darkblade or Steercar of the Swordsveneer. This is achieved through ritualistically marking their bodies with runes of conjugation and offering up the souls of 6 elves. However, Although this arrangement offers the Twinsouls phenomenal speed and strength, it also leads them to exhibit a curious lack of self-awareness over time, perhaps speaking only in third person, or remaining oblivious to the most grievous of wounds. Though these cracks, through them, the demon attempts to wrest control. Though the strongest-willed Symbaresh, known as ego pomps, may successfully subsume their patron and take their power without paying the cost, most are eventually overwhelmed, reduced to wretched soul slivers, trapped in their own bodies. Taking up weapons of their own choosing and discarding their helms, to better draw the Dark Prince's gaze, they gleefully forego the mono-obsessive techniques of their blade cult in favor of displaying their own inventive skills. These egomaniacs constantly compete against one another to perform the most impressive feats in battle, shrieking rhapsodies of self-praise all the while. Now, let me first start by saying that I think these units are very thematic, considering Malice Darkblade has the same possession of a Slaaneshi demon going on. This is kind of a pervasive thing in the lore of Slaanesh, is that champions will be possessed by a demon of Slaanesh to gain more power. We see this through Malice Darkblade. We could see this through Steercar of the Swordsveneer if he ever hopefully gets an implementation of some variety. And we could also see it again here in the Symbaresh Twinsouls. So they could I see them, they could have a multitude of variants. Their models give several different variants, like additional hand or dual weapons, whip infantry, great weapons. You could literally, like, with how much variety there are in their models, you can go any way about it. I made two, kind of pulling the best of everything together out of what I've seen in the models, just kind of mixing and matching. So first, we have a whip and chain infantry, because it's Slaanesh. I think him and Rihanna would be very proud to have this unit as one of the elites in the Slaanesh roster. So armored, Vanguard deployment. Again, Vanguard deployment is something we could potentially lose, but I think of all the gods, elites getting Vanguard deployment, I think Slaanesh makes sense. Gives them something unique. These guys can get in there, bog some people down, and then the Seekers or Chariots come in around or whatever. Armor piercing, armor sundering. So with these guys, I kind of think, so we got the bottom left model with the whip, right? Then we have the claws on the center bottom guy, and then that chain flail with the several clubs on the end that the bottom right guy has. So maybe, and here I am just mixing and matching, you put the claws on the end of the chains, so the whip guy has the whip and then has claws on the end of a chain, throws the chain, rips off armor, and then whips the bear skin. That's kind of how I see these guys working. But again, we could lose the armor sundering on this unit if we wanted to nerf it a little bit. Soul slither, so we'll get into that unique ability later in the bottom. And dodge, because basically their lore makes it sound like they do basically like an anime shift. I think of it like Alucard in the show Castlevania, where he basically, he just shifts through. He doesn't. It would appear basically to the naked eye of a human that they're less moving and more just phasing in and out of reality. So that's why I think they would have dodge. So 16 entities. We could possibly drop the entities since they're quote-unquote more elite than the Myrmidesh Painbringers, but I think 16 is still probably fine. 7,000 health, armor 100, so they take off their helmets. They're still pretty armored up. like the Myrmidesh, but they've lost their helmets at the very least. So 100 health, we could possibly bring that down to 80 or 90 if we wanted to nerf them a little bit. Leadership 80, speed 46, so they're a little less armored, a little more crazy and frenzied. And by the way, both of Myrmidesh Painbringers and Symbaresh could get frenzy. I didn't add the ability to them for that, but they could get frenzy because it literally says frenzy in their lore. But through their, I think I kind of added that similar effect in their abilities. So anyways, melee attack, so 50, they're whip infantry. So whip infantry, I compared them against, the Marauders of Slaanesh with whips, which have higher defense, lower melee attack. They still have magic. Like I said, they might have armor sundering with their chains. And then the dazed ability that the Doom Bowl Lords have with their whips. Again, if we wanted to nerf them, just take out the armor sundering. But I still would like them to have some sort of dazed ability to their attacks. Just through, cracking the whips in the enemy's face and just stunning them. Weapon strength, so they'd have, it clearly explains in their lore that they get extra speed and strength by being possessed by this Slaaneshi demon, so 106 melee strength, armor piercing, but this variant would probably lose the anti-infantry from the Myrmidesh, but they would gain 10 charge bonus, so up to 36. For abilities, Encourage, Hide in the Forest, Vanguard Deployment. I also put the Soul Slither ability and then Banished, but Banished comes from the Soul Slither ability. So I think how I've envisioned this this ability, I think is really, really cool. So basically it would act like between Scarbrand's Wrathful Reaper ability and Buy Our Blood. So it's a passive, we could call it Soul Slither or maybe Runes of Conjugation, because that's what actually is like activating the demon that they're possessed by. Passive ability, use is 1, so it makes them unbreakable for 30 seconds, like the Buy Our Blood ability, if leadership is wavering or lower. But after that 30, meanwhile, they're also going to get Rampage, but also armor piercing weapon damage and base weapon damage increase. So for this 30 seconds, unbreakable, rampaging, but also better AP and damage. So they're going to go absolutely berserk and just do a lot of damage before they break. But here's the thing, when they break, they're banished. So they crumble basically after that 30 seconds. Some people might think that might be too punishing to lose such a elite unit like that. So could possibly see it reworked, but I think this unit would be very powerful. So I think having that walking that fine line where you always have to be like, okay, we don't want the Soul Slither ability to activate because I'll lose the unit if it does. But, they'll do a bunch of damage before they die. So, kind of a bit of a balance there. Then I think we could also have a Great Weapons Infantry. So if we look at the bottom center guy, he has this big ornate cudgel. And then if we look at the top right guy, he's got a great sword. And then the bottom right, and a lot of these models have gauntlets that basically look like the Sisters of Slaughter gauntlet that almost acts as a shield. So, also this guy's got a hook on that gauntlet in the bottom right. So that's where I'm pulling this variant from. So Cudgel and Hook Infantry, which is like a great weapon, I guess. Armored and shielded. So that gauntlet is what gives them the shield. Just a bronze shield, though. Vanguard deployment, armor piercing, armor sundering, like we talked about. Mostly it just comes from that giant cudgel now, or possibly the hook. Soul Slither. I think if anything, these guys should keep the armor sundering though, and that last variant should maybe lose it. But yeah, dodge and possibly anti-large as well. 16 entities, 7,000 health, bronze shield, 100 armor. Again, maybe you could drop that 100 armor a little bit, but I think that's pretty good. It's just everything is covered in plate armor except their head, maybe their hands. Leadership 80, speed 46 still. So these guys would basically swap from the other variant, would gain more melee attack but less melee defense. 60 melee attack, 46 melee defense. Magical attacks, all yada yada. Basically it's a lot like the last unit. Improved weapon strength, maybe some anti-large. All the same abilities. Yeah, all the same abilities. And that pretty much covers those guys. I just think with that Soul Slither ability, like, and I would love it to see if when that ability activates, you see them get a little more demonic looking. Like some of these models, like the center guy kind of looks pretty human, but that bottom right guy almost looks like a demonette. So I'd love it if they kind of generally looked like the human guy, but when Soul Slither activates, they kind of, start glowing from the wounds, glowing purple from the wounds as the demon kind of escapes and takes over, and the face kind of turns a little more demonic looking. I don't know, that could be pretty neat. Now that wraps up all the aspiring champions units, but there are, funnily enough, Slaanesh, who usually does not get as much love as the other gods in Games Workshop's history, in Age of Sigmar got a lot more unique and cool mortal units. So I'm going to quickly go through a lot of them. There is one that is actually loreful to fantasy and not Age of Sigmar, but we'll get into that. So, firstly, we have the Slickblade Seekers. They are the chosen mortal knights of Slaanesh. They can no longer feel the satisfaction of killing an enemy from afar, as they would have done as Blissbarb Archers or Blissbarb Seekers. Instead, they seek to hear the screams of the dying up close, and to feel the spatter of hot gore upon them and their exalted steeds. Slickblade Seekers are immensely proud. They consider themselves princes of the battlefield, striving to outdo any who would contest that status. From the Myrmidesh, they were inspired to perfect the art of the high-velocity cut, and by observing Lumineth Cavaliers, they learned techniques to cleave through several foes on foot without breaking stride. To shame the brutish warriors of Khorne, they relish at decapitating foes with a single blow, a feat that wins them great devotion and applause from any Blissbarb Archers that follow in their wake. Not only are these kills deeply thrilling for the Slaaneshis, but they also ensure a constant supply of severed heads for the Blissbarb's great censors, empowering the effect of their arrows. The Slickblade Seekers favor a mesmerizingly fluid and graceful way of war. In combat, their blades loop and twirl even as they ride their darting mounts, hands free. As the whip-like tongues of the exalted steeds lash out at nearby enemies, so as well do the slick blades use their polearms to cleave open skulls and hack off limbs, each striving for the perfect cut. For the slick blade stats, I considered mostly the other Seeker units in the Slaanesh roster. I built it to be about a tier 3 anti-large variant to complement the Demonette version at tier 3. Their lore also does give some credence to them possibly having the Encourage ability, in which case I think maybe buff them a little bit and then make them a tier 4 unit. So yeah, anyway, Spear Cavalry, armored, anti-large, very fast, poison attack, 60 entities, 6,000 health, armor 60, leadership 60. So, back up to the armor real quick. Their models definitely look decently armored. Their legs, head, shoulders, arms all look covered. It's just their torso that is pretty open. Some of their legs are a little open too, but and then the steed itself looks at least halfway armored in its legs and its chest, where it would take most of the blows anyways. So I think 60 armor is probably appropriate, but it is the Slaanesh unit, so maybe you'd want to nerf that armor a little bit. Speed 100, obviously, it's a Seeker. Melee attack 36, poison, melee defense 40, weapon strength 46, armor piercing anti-large, charge bonus 40. For their abilities, they'd have Hide in the Forest, Vanguard Deployment, Immune to Psychology, Soul Hunters, and Causes Fear. So, the Soul Hunters ability, let me find it again real quick, gives plus 10 charge bonus, plus 16 leadership, and plus 22 damage resistance. All of the Mortal Seeker units have that ability, so these guys would have that too. So sort of as an extension to the Slickblade Seekers, I want to talk about Serpents of Slaanesh. So, of all the units probably in this video, well, first off, it is loreful to fantasy. So B, it is also the most likely to actually be implemented into the game. So, Serpents of Slaanesh are basically like cousins of the Steeds of Slaanesh. So about halfway down a steed of Slaanesh's long neck, there sometimes grows a vertical row of breasts, marking this thing as a creature of the serpent. The most disturbing quality of this creature is its conical head, equipped with a sphincter-like mouth. Flitting out from this orifice is a long electric blue whip-like tail that ends in a sharp barb. So there are two variants of the Steeds of Slaanesh. Large and serpentine with no legs and 6 breasts on its underside. This version is called the Serpent of Slaanesh. It is known to be ridden by Steerkar of the Swordsvanir and Kaelarn, who is enraptured of Slaanesh. And then also, obviously, the other variant is the Seekers we know that are in the game. Now, we've seen a mod already add the Pleasure Seekers, which are the Demonette version of mortals riding the Serpents of Slaanesh. And I think that implementation looks awesome. Having more entities, I think, for that unit is great. I think that what I would like to see, and what I formulated, is a more elite version for the mortals. So, basically, along the lines of what I've thought of for the Wrathmongers, for the Zongor Enlightened, the Gaunt Summoners, and the Puscoil Blightlords, where they act sort of as a super elite unit, as the Knights of Torgaval do, or the Queen Bess does. So yeah, we have the Pleasure Knights. So the model you see is just Steerkar of the Swordsvanir, doubled. I just doubled the image over, so it looks more like a multi-entity unit. Monstrous shock cavalry, they cause terror, armored and shielded, armor piercing, very fast, soporific musk, which reduces melee attack and defense. Their lore justifies that, and being a super elite unit also does too. Anti-large, dodge, and poison attacks. Dodge, we're giving them because they're serpents and they can just flit around, I would think. 6 entities, because sacred number of Slaanesh, 6. I think is pretty good. 6,900 health. They should be semi-squishy. I put them at 100 armor with silver shield, so the at least Steerkar's model has the giant glaive and shield. Obviously, the rider would be like head to toe armored, but the serpent itself is not going to be armored. So possibly we could reduce the armor to 80 just to, clarify that the mount is not actually that armored. But again, the rider is, so they should still be pretty armored. 80 leadership, Speed 90, so I think a little nerf to that 100 speed of the regular steed of Slaanesh would make sense, but they could also see 100 speed as well. It is a super unit after all. Melee attack 56, magic attack, poison, soporific musk, melee defense 36. They wouldn't have the best defense, but they'd be attacking like crazy. Weapon strength 260, anti-large, armor piercing 260 might be a little high. Might want to nerf that down, but I think they should be pretty strong. It is Slaanesh, who usually has pretty darn decent weapon strength. Charge bonus 60, sacred number Slaanesh. It should be high as well, being the premier cavalry unit that would exist in the roster, and a super unit. And for abilities, we'd have a kind of a plethora of stuff. Encourage, hide in the forest, vanguard deployment, immune to psychology, soul hunters like all the mortal cavalry of Slaanesh do, siege attacker, because they're monstrous, causes fear, causes terror. Again, I think these guys, of all the units talked about today, have the best shot of implementation in the game, and are my personal favorite. Now, for the honorable mention of the honorable mentions, we have the Blissbarbs. Now, there's two variants here. There's the Blissbarb Archers, and then there's the Blissbarb Seekers. So I'm going to knock out both of their lores real quick before I get into the stats. So, the Blissbarb Archers are the foot soldiers of Slaanesh. They are the lowest of Slaanesh's mortal devotees, and as such are not yet permitted by their domineering champions to engage in the glory of hand-to-hand combat. As such, they take up the task of bringing pain and destruction to the enemy from afar, becoming nimble archers. Blissbarb's retinues are often accompanied by shuffling figures known as homunculi, creatures that amass wherever the carnivals go. They create the incredibly potent Bliss Brew toxin utilized by the archers, harvesting the remains of enemies and sacrificed captives. The Blissbarb Archers are forever eager to prove themselves to their superiors as to climb the ranks of the carnival, forever goading one another to perform the most daring and impressive of shots. Even while running at full tilt across a rutted battleground, they can shoot with remarkable accuracy, laughing as their arrows find ingress through enemy eye sockets or chinks in their armor. When sure that their commanders are not watching, they will desperately indulge in stabbing their downed foe. Blissbarb Archers wield their treasured bows. The prongs on their arrowheads initially appear only decorative, but are also crafted to ensure maximum suffering. Now, the Blissbarb Seekers are Blissbarb Archers that have, tired of spending their time from afar, sought to acquire an exalted steed of Slaanesh. They name themselves after their demonic counterparts as a display of both pride and hubris. They resolve to tame an exalted steed, usually coming to Slaanesh after having a particularly close brush with death, or a similarly traumatic experience. The experience makes them want to live life's bounties to the fullest after coming so close to tasting death. As such, they immediately seek out the demonic beasts. Such self-destructive excess attracts them, and after a long confrontation, the now battered mortal is rewarded with a mount fit for a champion. The creed of the mounted Blissbarb is to always go faster. They are obsessed with murder at high speed, letting loose volleys after volley of deadly accurate arrows into the ranks of the foe, cackling madly as they do so. From the long, sinuous tongues of their mounts drips a poison of the foulest kind. It is with this venom that the Blissbarb Seekers coat their arrowheads, with even a drop spelling a tormenting death for the target. Both Slaanesh and Slaaneshi demons bond over this. Mortals and demons bond over this. Finding a cruel delight in watching the afflicted scream until their vocal cords go raw. Now, the Blissbarb Archers are stated in the lore as foot soldiers, not allowed to experience the pain and pleasure of hand-to-hand combat. They're the lowest of the low. That is why they are archers. I think that's cool. I think they would be a little more possibly elite than just marauders, but I think we could, if they didn't want to bring quote-unquote Blissbarbs into fantasy, just see Marauders of Slaanesh with bows. But I like this implementation better, especially with the Seekers. I think the Slaanesh roster being the fast skirmish type premier race of the game, I think having some ranged options would make them a lot more interesting to me at the very least. So again, I based the Blissbarb Archers on like Marauders of Slaanesh, but I also based them on the Shadow Walkers from the High Elves. The Seekers I based on the like Illyrian Reaver Horse Archers and like the Hawk Riders. That's kind of what I based them on. So the Blissbarb Archers, Missile Infantry, good range, Vanguard deployment, Stalk, Master Ambusher, 60 entities, 4,600 health, so this is a pretty squishy unit, armor 20, so you're not going to want to be taking damage. You want to take a shot, back out, get hidden, go back in, take a shot, back out, get hidden, skirmish. Leadership 60, speed 46, melee attack 36 with poison, so a decent melee combatant. They're good at basically unarmored chaff. They can kill pretty well, but they're going to be taking damage from anything they do melee combat with. Melee defense 26, weapon strength 26, charge bonus 16, which puts them, most of those stats put them around what the Marauders of Slaanesh have, a little lower in some cases. Ammunition 20, range 160, maybe, I think 160 is good though, but you know, I'm just thinking about if you were to nerf anything, but I think that's good. Missile strength 26 at a 60 entity unit, 26 is pretty good. That's lower than the Shadow Walkers at the very least. Definitely poison ammunition. All their lore says they coat their arrows with that poison. They might even get a unique poison similar to what Oxyodal has. For their abilities, they would have Vanguard deployment, fire whilst moving, stalk, and immune to psychology. They might not have stalk. That would be the one thing if I were to nerf this unit. It would take out, but that would be really, really, really useful in the Slaanesh roster to have a unit like that with stock. Oh, I forgot, I also based these guys slightly on Ungor Raiders as well. Kind of like Ungor Raiders, Marauders of Slaanesh, and the Shadow Walkers. Now, for the Blissbarb Seekers, they're basically just Blissbarb Archers on Seekers. Get a little bump to health. They'd have about half the entities. My thing just... Yeah, there we go. Okay. They'd have fire whilst moving. Very fast. They're on Seekers, so they got 100 health. I think they would probably keep the armor 20. They might get a little bump in armor if their steeds have some armor. Similar melee stats. Bump in weapon strength and charge bonus for being on Seekers. Little less ammunition, little less range, but more than double the missile strength at 56. I think around that ballpark of missile strength is pretty good for them. And then they would get Causes Fear because they're on Seekers, and Soul Hunters because they're on Seekers. And yeah, I think, again, I think having these units in Slaanesh's roster would make them a whole lot more useful. We know we got the Marauder Horsemen of Slaanesh with Javelins now, so at least there's some range in the Slaanesh roster, but I would certainly like to see more, and the Blissbarb Archers are a good avenue for that. So yeah, that is all I have for Slaanesh today. That will also wrap out this series. I might also explore super units for other races in a sequel series to this. I have lots of other types of series and videos in mind, but I would love if any of you want me to cover something specifically, tell me the ideas in the comments, and I will certainly consider them if I think I have something to add to it, of course. Yeah, so please let me know. Yeah, thanks for watching. If you like this series, any of my videos, check out my other ones, like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification. You'll get notifications on when I drop more videos. Yeah, thanks again, everybody. Have a wonderful day.